Settle in, friend. Let the day ease off your shoulders and let the lamp grow soft, because tonight we are going somewhere very gentle. Tonight we are going to a sunlit afternoon in California. More than 3 decades ago, when 2 young men who had not yet done anything the world would remember met for the first time on a quiet university campus and argued, kindly, about almost everything. The year is 1995. The season is spring. The place is Stanford, in the long, flat valley south of San Francisco, where the hills are still green from the winter rains, and the air smells of warm grass, of dust on stone, of eucalyptus leaves crushed underfoot. The university sits in a great open plain of sandstone arcades and red tile rooftops, the kind of architecture that seems to have been there forever, baked the color of honey by 100 slow Californian summers. Bicycles drift along the paths. Sprinklers tick softly across the lawns. Somewhere, very far away, a train bell rings once and falls silent. Into this quiet afternoon walks a young man named Larry Page. He is 22 years old. He is soft-spoken, a little shy, with thoughtful eyes and a mind that turns things over slowly and patiently, the way a river turns a stone. He has just arrived from Michigan, where he grew up in a house full of computers and patient, curious parents. And he is here because Stanford has accepted him into its graduate program in computer science. Today is a tour for the prospective students, a chance to walk the campus and decide whether this is the place where he will spend the next several years of his life. He carries a small folder. He squints up at the warm yellow walls and at the deep blue California sky behind them, and he thinks, perhaps, that he could be happy here. His guide is late. His guide is, in fact, somewhere on the other side of campus, walking quickly, talking even more quickly, already mid-sentence, about something that may or may not have anything to do with the tour. His name is Sergey Brin. He is 21. He came to America from the Soviet Union as a small boy, holding his mother's hand on a long airplane, and he has grown up to be bright and bold and very, very fast. Fast in his speech, fast in his thinking, fast on his feet. He is a second-year graduate student, which makes him an old hand by Stanford standards, and he has volunteered to show the newcomers around because he likes meeting people, and because he likes the sound of his own ideas bouncing off a good listener. When Sergey finally arrives, the 2 young men look at each other for the first time. Larry is tall and quiet. Sergey is compact and grinning. Neither of them knows yet that this small, unremarkable moment will one day be told and retold in books and documentaries, and that someday, somewhere, a sleepy voice will describe it on a winter night to help strangers fall asleep. For now, it is only an afternoon, only a tour, only a handshake in the shade. They begin to walk. Sergey points out the buildings. The Memorial Church, with its great mosaic glittering in the sun, the bookstore where the students linger over coffee, the long sandstone arcades that throw cool stripes of shadow across the warm stone underfoot. And almost at once, in the gentlest possible way, they begin to disagree. They disagree about city planning. They disagree about philosophy. They disagree about the right way to think about a problem, and the wrong way, and whether there is, in the end, any difference between the two. Sergey speaks fast and certain. Larry answers slowly and stubborn. Neither of them gives an inch. Neither of them is rude. It is the kind of argument that two young people have when they are quietly delighted to have found someone worth arguing with. They walk past the eucalyptus trees, which shed their long, pale leaves with a faint, papery whisper. They walk past lawns where students lie on their backs reading paperbacks. They walk past a fountain where the water is a clean, slow, hypnotic sound. And by the time the tour is over, by the time the sun has tilted toward the western hills and the shadows under the arcades have grown long and soft, something very small and very important has happened. Two strangers have walked away friends. The first quiet thread of an enormous story has, without anyone noticing at all, been gently tied. The seasons turn the way they always do on the Stanford campus, gently and almost without announcement. The summer of 1995 drifts into a long, warm autumn, and that autumn into a mild Californian winter. And somewhere in there, the friendship between Larry Page and Sergey Brin begins to deepen in the quiet, unremarkable way that real friendships often do. They take the same seminars. They argue over the same papers. They walk back from the same late-night coffee, runs across the same dim quad, their voices low under the palm trees, their breath barely visible in the cool air drifting in from the bay. And then, in the autumn of 1996, they are given a small shared office of their own. It is on the third floor of Stanford's brand new Gates Computer Science Building, a handsome brick building set among the older sandstone arcades, still smelling faintly of fresh paint and new carpet, and the particular quiet of a place that has only recently learned how to hold people. The hallways are wide and bright. The doors are pale wood. Sunlight comes in through tall windows in long, slow rectangles, sliding across the floor as the afternoons drift by. Their office is small. It was never meant to feel grand. There are two desks, pushed close together so that the two young men can almost reach across and tap each other on the shoulder without standing up. There is a window that looks out over the rooftops and the eucalyptus trees, and on clear days you can see the foothills lying low and golden in the distance, the soft California light pooling on every surface in the room. The walls are lined, almost from floor to ceiling, with whiteboards. And those whiteboards quickly fill. Equations bloom across them in blue and black and red marker, written and erased and rewritten until the surface itself seems to remember the ghosts of older ideas. There are arrows leading from one little cluster of symbols to another. There are diagrams of the web drawn as a great tangle of dots and lines, like a constellation no one has ever named. There are lists of questions in Larry's careful handwriting and looping, energetic notes in Sergey's looser script, and tiny jokes scrawled in the corners that only the two of them understand. The desks themselves grow gently chaotic in the way that graduate students' desks do. There are stacks of printouts, papers from conferences with the corners curled, photocopied chapters of textbooks heavy with yellow highlighter. There are coffee cups. There are pizza boxes from the little places along El Camino Real, leaning quietly against one another like tired old friends. There are computer manuals, a stuffed toy or two, a tangle of network cables snaking across the floor. The air smells of warm electronics and cardboard, and the faint, sweet ghost of last night's dinner. And in the middle of all that gentle clutter, an idea begins to take shape. They call it BackRub. It is, at first, only a small academic project. A web crawler. A program designed to wander out across the still young World Wide Web, link by patient link, and bring back a quiet record of what it finds. The web in 1996 is a strange and rapidly growing place, more like a wild garden than a library, and almost no one yet knows how to make sense of all of it. Larry and Sergey are simply curious. They want to see if they can map the shape of it, to understand the way one page points to another and another, like footpaths winding through a vast and unfamiliar forest. They borrow what they need. A handful of Sun workstations, kindly lent by the department, are wheeled into place and arranged where they will fit. The machines hum softly, the way good machines do, their cooling fans turning out a steady, warm breath of sound that fills the little office and never quite stops. The hum becomes, very quickly, the soundtrack of their long evenings, a soft mechanical lullaby beneath the scratch of pens on whiteboard and the click of keys. Outside the window, the lights of the campus come on one by one as the sky goes lavender, then dusky blue, then black. The Gates building empties. Footsteps fade. Doors close down the corridor. And still, in that one small lit room on the third floor, two graduate students lean over their keyboards in the warm glow of monitors, their faces calm and absorbed, watching the first slow trickle of the web come quietly home to them across the borrowed wires. Nothing about it looks important. Nothing about it looks like history. It only looks, on those soft autumn nights, like two friends at work. And yet, somewhere inside that quiet, ordinary work, an idea is beginning to turn. It does not arrive in a flash. It does not arrive with thunder. It arrives the way most good ideas arrive in graduate school, slowly, almost shyly, in the middle of a long conversation about something else. Larry has been thinking, for months now, about the strange, sprawling shape of the early web. He has been thinking about how a person finds anything in it at all. The search engines of the day count words. They look at a page and ask, in essence, how many times does this page say what you are looking for? And Larry, sitting at his desk under the soft hum of the office lights, begins to wonder if that is really the right question. Because the web, he sees, is not a library of documents. It is a conversation. It is a vast, restless web of pages pointing at one another, each link a small nod of attention, a small vote of trust. When a respected research page links to another page, it is whispering in its quiet, machine-readable way, "This one is worth reading." And when many pages whisper the same thing about the same page, something almost human begins to emerge from the noise. Something like reputation, something like consensus, something like the gentle weight of agreement. What if, Larry thinks, you ranked pages not by what they said about themselves, but by what the rest of the web said about them? He sketches it out on scratch paper. He talks it through with Sergey, who paces, who argues, who pushes back, who finally agrees, and then improves it. Because the trick, they realize, is that not all links are equal. A link from a tiny forgotten corner of the web should not count the same as a link from a beloved, much-cited research hub. The importance of a page depends on the importance of the pages that point to it, which in turn depends on the importance of the pages that point to those, and so on, in a soft, recursive shimmer that loops gently back on itself like ripples on a pond. It is, in its quiet way, a very old idea dressed in new clothes. It is the way scholars have always evaluated each other, by who cites whom, by whose name keeps appearing in the footnotes of the most thoughtful work. They are simply teaching the web to do, at the speed of arithmetic, what scholarship has always done at the speed of years. Larry gives it a name. He calls it PageRank. There is a small private joke folded into the word, a quiet pun on his own surname, the kind of joke a soft-spoken person allows himself only once. The math, when it is written out, is elegant. The implementation is, at first, very small. But the idea inside it is enormous, and they both feel, in the gentle, understated way of people who do not yet know how their lives are going to change, that they have found something true. Now they need somewhere to put it, because the web, even in 1996, is not small. To rank pages by their links, you must first gather the pages, and the pages are many, and the disks they require are many, and graduate students do not have many disks. So Larry and Sergey do what graduate students have always done. They borrow. They scavenge. They follow the loading dock rumors of which lab has retired which machine. They wheel cast-off drives back to the Gates building on rolling carts, one careful trip at a time. And then, because the drives need somewhere to live, and because proper server racks cost real money, they build a housing out of what they have. They walk over to the lab's playful corner of building blocks, the colorful plastic bricks kept around for tinkering, for prototyping, for the small joys of engineering, and they begin to assemble. Red brick, blue brick, yellow brick. They build a tower, a careful little citadel, snapping the pieces together with the soft, satisfying click that anyone who has ever been a child remembers in their hands. Inside that bright childlike housing, the disks hum and spin. Inside the disks, the index of the early web slowly grows, page by linked page, like a quiet library copying itself by candlelight. From the outside it looks absurd. It looks like a science fair project. It looks like a toy. But that is, perhaps, the gentlest secret of how new things are made. They begin as toys. They begin in borrowed corners. They begin in colored plastic on graduate student desks, late at night, under the soft, warm lamps of a building that is mostly asleep. And only later, much later, does anyone think to call them history. By the spring of 1997, the toy has grown. The little crawler that Larry and Sergey built in their cluttered office on the 4th floor of the Gates Computer Science Building is no longer something you can hold in your hands or describe in a single sentence. It has become a quiet, patient creature that lives on a small forest of borrowed machines, reaching out night and day across the slow copper veins of the early web, gathering pages, weighing the links between them, learning, in its strange numerical way, which corners of the internet other corners seem to trust. And the name they gave it in those first months no longer fits. BackRub. A graduate student joke, really. A reference to the backlinks the program followed home, the way each web page reaches behind itself to acknowledge the pages that pointed its way. It had been a fine name for a class project. A fine name for something that lived on a single rack of machines and answered to 2 students and a couple of patient advisors. But the thing on their screens now is bigger than a class project. It is hungrier. It is reaching further. It is beginning, very gently, to feel less like an experiment and more like a small public service that nobody has yet announced. So one afternoon, in a small office whiteboard session of the kind that happens 1,000 times in 1,000 campus buildings without ever being remembered, they sit down to give the project a new name. There are a few of them in the room. Larry, soft-spoken, leaning back in his chair, listening more than he speaks. Sergey, restless, drumming a marker against the edge of the desk. A handful of office mates and friends, the loose constellation of graduate students who drift in and out of one another's projects in any healthy department. The afternoon light comes through the long Stanford windows in pale gold bars, and the whiteboard is already a palimpsest of half-erased equations, arrows, coffee rings. Names are tried and laid aside. Names that are too clever. Names that are too plain. Names that sound like other companies. Names that sound like nothing at all. The marker squeaks and is wiped away. Squeaks and is wiped away. And the air in the room takes on that comfortable, slightly drowsy quality that settles over any group of friends who have been thinking together for too long. And then, somewhere in the middle of it, somebody, a fellow student named Sean, the story will later say, offers a word from the back of mathematics. The number a young boy named Milton Sirota proposed in 1920 when his uncle, the mathematician Edward Kasner, asked him what he might call a 1 followed by 100 zeros. A child's word for a child-sized impossibility. A number larger than the atoms in the visible universe. A number you cannot count to, cannot picture, cannot fit inside any room you have ever been in. A number that exists only as a kind of soft, smiling gesture toward the unimaginable. It is, in its quiet way, exactly the right size. Because what the little crawler is beginning to do, what it is reaching toward, even if no one in the room would yet say so out loud, is the unimaginable. The whole of the web. The whole of what humans have written down and put online, and the whole of what they will write tomorrow, and the day after, and the year after that. A library that has no walls and no librarian, growing faster every season than any single mind can follow. To name such a project after a finite number would be to lie about its ambition. To name it after a Googol, after a number so large that it laughs at counting, is to tell the truth. And then, in the small accident that history seems to love, somebody writes the word on the whiteboard and spells it wrong. G-O-O. G-L-E. 6 letters, where there should have been 6 different letters. A soft, lopsided misspelling, the kind any tired graduate student might make in the middle of a long afternoon. Nobody, in that moment, makes a fuss about it. Nobody crosses it out. Somebody perhaps laughs. Somebody else perhaps tilts their head and says, "That actually looks rather nice." It does look rather nice. It is rounder than Googol. Friendlier. The double O in the middle gives it a pair of soft, surprised eyes. It does not look like the name of a fearsome corporation. It looks like the name of something a child might draw on the front of a notebook. And so, almost without ceremony, the misspelling stays. Larry types it into the system. The little crawler, which has been BackRub all its short life, accepts the new name without protest. the way a small animal accepts a new collar. By evening, the word "dal Google" is on their machines, in their email, on the lips of their friends. A misspelled number, given quietly to a project that intends, someday, to organize everything. By the time late summer settles over Palo Alto, the project has a name, a small steady hum of traffic from Stanford classmates, and the particular crowded look of a thing that has outgrown the room it lives in. The Gates Building office is a thicket of cables now. The borrowed discs click softly through the night. Sergey has begun to talk, in his easy, quick way, about the world beyond the campus, about whether Google might one day be something people use without knowing they are using it, the way they use light switches, or doorknobs, or the post. But to step beyond Stanford requires money, and money requires a meeting. And meetings, in this corner of the valley in 1998, tend to happen on porches, over coffee, in the soft, slow morning light before the day has quite made up its mind. A friend of a friend has put in a word with Andy Bechtolsheim. Andy is one of the co-founders of Sun Microsystems, a tall, mild, German-born engineer with a gentle accent and a reputation for seeing in 3 minutes flat whether a thing is worth building. He drives a fast car and keeps an early schedule. He has agreed to look at this little student search engine before the workday begins. The meeting is set for the porch of a house on Channing Avenue, where a mutual friend, a professor named David Sheraton, lives among hedges and pale roses. The morning is the kind that California gives away in handfuls in late August. A soft white sky, the air still cool from the bay, the eucalyptus down the street letting out their thin medicinal scent. A few sprinklers tick somewhere in the next yard. A jay calls once, then forgets. Larry and Sergey arrive in a borrowed car, with a laptop balanced on Sergey's knees like a sleeping cat. They have not slept much. They have rehearsed their demo, abandoned their rehearsal, and decided simply to type things into the little white box and let the box answer for itself. Andy pulls into the driveway just past dawn. He is friendly, unhurried, already dressed for a long day at Sun. He sits on the porch step. They open the laptop on a small painted table. The screen, in the pale outdoor light, looks almost like a page in a book. Sergey types. Larry watches. The cursor blinks. The little crawler, 4 states away in its closet of borrowed servers, hears the question and turns toward it the way a sunflower turns toward a window. Pages flicker up the screen. Andy reads. He asks for another query, then another. He nods, the small, private nod of an engineer, recognizing, in someone else's work, the thing he himself would have wanted to make. He asks 1 or 2 questions about how the ranking is done, listens to the answer, and does not ask again. It does not take long. 3 minutes. Perhaps 4. The jay in the next yard tries another note. Andy looks at his watch. He is, as always, due somewhere else. He says, in his gentle way, that he thinks instead of talking further, they should simply get started. That he would like to write a check now, this morning on the porch, so the 2 of them can stop worrying about money and go back to building. He asks who to make it out to. Larry and Sergey look at each other. Non-Google, asterisk, they say. after a moment. There is no Google Inc. There is no company at all. There is a project, a name, 2 graduate students, a garage they have not yet rented, and a wooden table on a porch in Palo Alto with a laptop on it and a J in the hedge. Andy takes out his checkbook. He uncaps a pen. The pen makes the soft, deliberate sound of ink finding paper. He writes the date. He writes $100,000 asterisk in the long, careful hand of a man who has done this before. He signs his name. He tears the check along its perforation, the small, clean, tearing sound of a page leaving its book, and hands it across the table. Then he stands, says something kind, gets back into his fast car, and drives away down Channing Avenue into the rest of his day. Larry and Sergey are left on the porch with a piece of pale blue paper in their hands. They look at it for a long time. They look at each other. They laugh, the surprised quiet laugh of people who have just been handed a future. They do not yet have a bank account in the name of Google Inc. They do not yet have a Google Inc. The check, folded carefully, will go home with them and live, for the next 2 weeks, in the cool dark of a desk drawer, waiting, patient as a seed, for the company it has already decided to believe in. For 2 weeks, then, the check sleeps. It sleeps the way important things often sleep in the lives of quiet people, without fanfare, without ceremony, tucked between a stack of printer paper and a yellow legal pad in a desk drawer that smells faintly of pencil shavings and old coffee. Outside that drawer, in the meantime, the slow paperwork of becoming a company unfolds. There are forms to file with the state of California. There is a name to register, a tax identification number to request, a bank willing to open an account for a search engine that, by most measures, is still mostly an idea. Larry and Sergey move through these tasks the way they move through everything, methodically, a little stubbornly, half distracted by the next interesting problem already forming at the edge of their thinking. And then, on the 4th of September, 1998, on a warm, late summer Friday in Northern California, Google Inc. quietly comes into being. There is no ribbon cut. There is no press release. Somewhere in Sacramento, a clerk stamps a piece of paper and slides it onto a pile. And just like that, in the small, unremarkable way that most beginnings actually begin, the company exists. The check, folded all this time, is unfolded at last. It is carried into a bank. It is deposited. The seed has found its soil. The soil, as it happens, is a garage. It belongs to a young Stanford alum named Susan Wojcicki, who has only recently bought a modest single-story house at 232 Santa Margarita Avenue in Menlo Park, and who is, like a great many bright young people on the peninsula that autumn, slightly worried about how to make the mortgage. She has met these two through her sister Anne, who knows Sergey, and they seem polite and earnest, and they need somewhere to put their servers, and they are willing to pay her a fair monthly rent for the privilege. So she hands them a key. And the great American garage story, which began with Hewlett and Packard a few miles up the road in 1939, and which carried on with 2 boys named Wozniak and Jobs in a Los Altos cul-de-sac, begins again, this time among the orange trees and the bottlebrush hedges of a quiet residential street, where the loudest sound on most afternoons is the soft hush of a sprinkler system somewhere 2 doors down. The garage itself is nothing special, which is precisely what makes it the right kind of place. The floor is wood, scuffed in soft, pale paths where bicycles and lawn chairs have been dragged across it for years. The walls are off-white. There is a single bare bulb overhead, and a window on one side that looks out onto a strip of side yard where a hummingbird sometimes hovers in the late afternoon. They set up folding tables, the kind you might use for a church potluck, and on the folding tables they arrange cheap office chairs, bought in a rush from a place that sells them by the dozen. They wheel in server towers, beige and chunky and warm, and they line them carefully along one wall, where the indicator lights blink in slow, patient constellations through the night. Beside the servers, almost comically, are Susan's washer and dryer. The two machines hum on their own private schedule, oblivious to the small revolution they are quietly chaperoning. On laundry days, the air in the garage smells faintly of clean cotton and warm dust, and the particular electric warmth of computers thinking hard about something. It is, somehow, a deeply comforting smell. In the middle of the room, they place a ping-pong table. It is meant, eventually, for ping-pong. But almost immediately, it becomes a conference desk, and a lunch counter, and a sorting surface for cables, and a place to spread out printouts of search results and scribble in the margins. Around that table, sometimes seated, sometimes standing, sometimes leaning on it with one elbow while the other hand cradles a mug, they begin the slow work of turning a graduate school project into a small functioning business. There is a refrigerator in the corner, stocked at first with not very much. There is a back door that opens onto a patch of California garden, where a single orange tree heavy with fruit drops a soft thump into the grass once or twice a day. The neighborhood is quiet. The light through the high garage window moves slowly across the wood floor as the afternoon turns to evening. It is the smallest possible beginning. 2 friends, a few servers, a borrowed garage, and the patient hum of machines doing arithmetic, hour after hour, while the world outside knows nothing of them yet. By the early weeks of 1999, the garage on Santa Margarita Avenue has begun, very quietly, to feel small. There are too many cables now for the wood floor to hide. Too many servers stacked in too many corners, blinking their patient green and amber eyes through the late evenings. Too many pairs of sneakers lined up by the door. Too many coffee cups balanced on too many borrowed surfaces. Susan, gentle and unflappable, still brings them tea and laundry baskets, and the kindly tolerance of a landlord who has begun to suspect her tenants will one day be in history books. But the company has outgrown its first home, in the way a young animal outgrows a basket, slowly and then all at once. And so on a soft California morning in February, Larry and Sergey and their small handful of engineers begin to carry the boxes out to the curb. They are moving only a few miles north up the peninsula into the heart of downtown Palo Alto. There on University Avenue, above a bicycle shop with a painted wooden sign and a window full of polished frames, there is a loft. A real loft, with tall windows and an old freight staircase and floorboards that creak in a friendly way when you cross them. The rent is modest. The ceiling is high. There is room, finally, to think. They move in slowly, without ceremony, the way people move into a place they hope to love. The desks are second-hand, scavenged from estate sales and curbsides in the back rooms of older Stanford labs. mismatched in height and color and gently scarred by other people's work. The chairs do not match either. The bookshelves are made of unfinished pine. Someone has brought a lamp from home, and someone else a small green plant in a clay pot. And someone has tacked up a paper map of the world above the printer, where the toner is always almost out. The brick walls have been left exposed. In the late mornings, when the sun rises high enough to clear the rooftops along the avenue, light comes slanting in through those tall front windows in long, warm bars, falling across the keyboards and the coffee mugs and the soft, pale dust that drifts in any old building, settling slowly, slowly, like snow that has decided to take its time. From the floor below comes the sound of the bicycle shop opening for the day. The squeak of the front door. The distant ring of a small brass bell. The whir of a wheel being spun on its stand. The patient click of gears being indexed by a mechanic who is whistling something old and tuneless. And rising up through the floorboards, faint but unmistakable, the warm, oily, slightly sweet smell of bicycle grease, a smell that will, for the rest of their lives, remind every engineer in this loft of being young and being here. There are a few dozen of them now. Not many. Few enough that everyone still knows each other's names, each other's coffee orders, each other's small private jokes. They share one long table down the middle of the room, a battered wooden thing that has been pushed together out of two smaller tables and covered, by lunchtime, with the soft crinkle of foil-wrapped burritos from the place around the corner. Salsa drips onto napkins. Someone laughs at something on a screen. Someone else is drawing a diagram on a whiteboard with a marker that is running dry, the lines coming out impatient gray ghosts of themselves. In the corner, the servers click softly to themselves, doing their work. They are still the same odd, lovable assembly of borrowed and bought and home-built machines that hummed in the garage, only now there are more of them, and they sit on metal racks instead of Lego, and they have a little fan beside them, turning gently in the warm afternoon air. The index of the web grows, page by page, link by link, while no one in the loft is watching. It does not need watching. It only needs the quiet patience of electricity and time. Larry sits at one end of the long table, mostly listening. Sergey paces, thinking out loud, occasionally laughing at his own jokes. Outside on University Avenue, the ordinary life of a small California downtown moves past the windows, strollers and bicycles and the slow drift of pedestrians on a Tuesday afternoon, and none of them know, and none of them need to know, that above the bicycle shop, in a sunlit loft with second-hand desks, a few dozen friends are quietly building something that will, in time, find them all. By the spring of 2003, the bicycle shop loft has begun, very gently, to outgrow itself. There are too many desks and not quite enough windows, too many laptops humming on too few outlets, and the long table where Larry once mostly listened has grown a constellation of coffee rings around its edges. So one quiet morning, in the unhurried way that good things tend to happen at Google, the company packs up its mismatched chairs and its boxes of cables and its potted plants and moves a few miles south, down the long flat reach of the peninsula, to a place called Mountain View. The new home is not a tower. It is not a campus of mirrored skyscrapers. It is instead a low and friendly cluster of glass and stucco buildings, set out across green lawns the way a small village might be set among its fields. The buildings used to belong to Silicon Graphics, the company whose machines rendered the dinosaurs of Jurassic Park and the first pixelated wonders of so many childhoods. And there is something fitting about that. One quiet generation of dreamers handing the keys gently to the next. The Google engineers walked the corridors on that first day with the slightly bewildered look of children who have just been told the whole house is theirs. Outside, the eucalyptus trees lean in close. They are tall and silver-leafed and fragrant, the way only California eucalyptus can be, releasing that soft medicinal sweetness into the warm afternoon air, and when the breeze comes in off the bay, it carries with it the green salt smell of the Shoreline marsh just beyond the parking lot. Egrets wade in the shallow tidal channels. Red-winged blackbirds rock on the cattails. Out past the pickleweed and the slow brown slows, sailboats lean on the wind of San Francisco Bay, their white triangles drifting against the blue-gold hills of the East Bay across the water. It is the kind of place where a person could, if they wished, simply stop and breathe for a while. The buildings, when you step inside them, are bright. The hallways are painted in the colors of children's blocks: tomato red, lemon yellow, a soft sky blue, and the conference rooms are given names that no respectable corporation would ever choose. There is a room called Tatooine and a room called Hoth, a room named for a Lego brick, and a room named for a planet that does not exist. Engineers gather in them, barefoot sometimes, laptops balanced on their knees, the afternoon light slanting through the windows and falling in long, warm rectangles across the carpet. Whiteboards bloom with diagrams that look, at a distance, like the constellations of a sky no one has yet mapped. Outside every door, the bicycles wait. They are painted in primary colors: fire engine red, post office blue, sunflower yellow, parrot green, and they lean in casual rows against the walls, against the bike racks, against the trunks of the eucalyptus trees themselves. Anyone who needs to cross the campus simply takes one. You ride from a meeting about search rankings to a lunch of green curry and warm sourdough, your laptop in the basket, the wind in your hair, the smell of the marsh in your nose. There are people playing volleyball on a sand court between two of the buildings. There is a swimming pool the size of a closet, where a single swimmer can paddle slowly against the gentle artificial current. There is somewhere a piano that someone has begun to play. The engineers wander the lawns barefoot when the grass is warm. They lie on their backs sometimes in the long blue hours of late afternoon and watch the small white clouds drift over the Santa Cruz Mountains. Dogs nose around between the picnic tables. A toddler, brought to work for the day, takes uncertain steps across the path while her mother smiles and types. The cafeteria, which everyone has begun to call Charlie's, sets out its plates of roasted vegetables and its bowls of noodles and its trays of fresh berries, and the line moves slowly because everyone is talking, everyone is laughing, everyone is in the middle of some story they cannot quite finish before the soup arrives. And in this gentle place, almost without anyone deciding it, the name finds them. Not the corporate name, not the legal name. The other name, the one that sticks to a place the way moss sticks to the north side of a stone. People begin to call it, simply, the Googleplex. The Googleplex among the eucalyptus trees. The Googleplex, by the marsh. A word as soft and slightly silly as the company itself. A word for a home rather than a headquarters. drifting out over the lawns on the warm California afternoons and settling, like a leaf, gently into place. And so the seasons turn gently around the Googleplex. The eucalyptus trees by the Shoreline marsh shed their long ribbons of bark in the summer heat, and the bicycles lean in their racks, and the engineers come and go through the glass doors with their notebooks and their coffee cups, and the company that began in a garage on Santa Margarita Avenue keeps quietly, steadily growing. It is the spring of 2004. The world outside is busy with its own concerns, and inside the long, low buildings of Mountain View, Larry and Sergey and the people they have gathered around them are working on something they are not quite ready to talk about. A small team has been building it for months in a corner of the campus. They are calling it, almost as a joke, Caribou. It is an email service, but it is an email service like none that has come before. On the 1st of April, 2004, on April Fool's Day, of all the soft and unlikely days in the year, Google announces it to the world. They call it Gmail. And they offer it to anyone who wants one, a free email account with 1 full gigabyte of storage. 1 gigabyte. In a year when the email services of the day are measuring their inboxes in single megabytes, when people are forever deleting old letters to make room for new ones, the number sounds so impossible that for a long, quiet moment, most of the world simply does not believe it. They read the announcement and they smile and they shake their heads, because surely, this is a prank. It is the 1st of April, after all. It is the day for jokes. But it is not a joke. It is the beginning of a slow, gentle revolution in the way ordinary people will keep their letters. A small and patient gift of room. Room to remember, room to keep things, room to never have to throw an old message away. Through the warm months that follow, the invitations trickle out into the world, one by one, each Gmail account opened by a friend who knows a friend who knows a friend at Google, and the inboxes begin to fill, and the conversations that once vanished begin instead to be saved, threaded together like beads on a long, quiet string. And then comes August. On the 19th of August, 2004, on a clear summer morning, the company holds its public stock offering. They do it in their own way. They do not let the great Wall Street banks set the price for them in the usual back rooms. They hold a Dutch auction instead, so that anyone, anywhere, can place a bid for shares. It is unfussy. It is patient. It is, in its quiet way, a little stubborn. And by the close of the trading day, Google is a public company. And Larry and Sergey and a great many of the engineers who came along with them in those early Mountain View years are, suddenly and almost shyly, very wealthy people. They go home that evening to their small houses. They ride their bicycles. They keep working. The years that follow are full of other gifts. Google Maps arrives, and the streets of the world unfold themselves in soft pastel colors on the screen, and a person can look at their own neighborhood from above and trace the shape of the block they grew up on. Google Earth arrives, and the whole planet is suddenly there to be tilted and turned. The blue oceans and the brown deserts and the white poles spinning gently under the cursor like a globe on a child's desk. And in the same patient stretch of years, almost without anyone noticing, the company quietly acquires 2 very small companies. One of them is called Android. It is a tiny operation working on software for mobile phones, a thing that almost no one yet understands will matter the way it is going to matter. Larry sees something in it. He brings it home. The other is called YouTube. It is a scrappy little video sharing site running out of an office above a pizza place in San Mateo, founded by 3 young engineers who had all once worked together at PayPal. Google buys it in the autumn of 2006. No one, not even Larry and Sergey, fully understands yet what either of these 2 small acquisitions is going to become. But they make them anyway, gently, the way you might tuck a seed into the soil of a garden in late October, not knowing exactly what shape it will take, only that you would like, very much, to see what grows. And outside the long, low buildings of Mountain View, the eucalyptus trees go on shedding their bark. The years that follow have the soft, accumulating quality of snow falling on a wide field overnight. You do not see it happen. You only wake one morning and find that the world has been quietly remade. Gmail, which began as a small in-house tool with a strange and generous gigabyte of storage, slips out into the world on the first day of April in 2004 and is mistaken, briefly, for a joke. Maps arrives the following winter, folding the whole tangled atlas of the planet into a single blue-edged window on a screen. A pair of engineers in a small office begin a project to scan the world's books, page by patient page, the way a monk in a stone scriptorium might once have copied a psalter by candlelight. And somewhere in a quieter corner of the company, a mobile operating system named after a small green robot is being coaxed into being, line by line, by a team that does not yet know how many pockets it will eventually live in. By then, the Googleplex has grown into something like a small, friendly town. There are bicycles leaning against the walls in primary colors, and long tables where engineers eat lunch beside the people who cook it, and volleyball nets strung between poles on a lawn that smells, in the late afternoon, of cut grass and warm eucalyptus. There is a replica of Spaceship One hanging from a ceiling. There are dogs asleep under desks. There are whiteboards covered, as the whiteboards in the Gates building once were, with arrows and equations and the small, triumphant exclamation marks of people who have just understood something together. And there is, still, that same quiet idea at the center of it all, that the best way to understand a thing is to listen to what everyone else is already saying about it. PageRank, grown up now, wearing a suit of newer mathematics, but recognizable underneath. A graduate student's hunch, scaled to the size of the world. In 2006, in a deal that surprises almost everyone, Google buys a 16-month-old video website run by 3 former PayPal engineers out of an office above a pizzeria in San Mateo. YouTube. A place where, very soon, a child in one country will learn to tie her shoes from a grandmother in another, and an old man will find, after 50 years, the song his mother used to sing to him at bedtime. Larry and Sergey, who once fought their way through a campus tour, watched this small acquisition unfold with the same gentle attention they gave to the Lego disc array all those years ago in the basement of the Gates building. The company keeps growing, the way a tree grows, not in a single dramatic gesture, but ring by ring, season by season, mostly while no one is looking. And outside, the marshland of Shoreline does what marshlands do. The tide comes in over the mudflats. The egrets stand on one leg in the shallows, perfectly still, as though listening for something only they can hear. The salt grasses bend in the soft western wind that comes in off the bay in the late afternoon, carrying with it the faint smell of the Pacific, the faint cry of a gull, the hum of a single small plane crossing the sky toward Moffett Field. The sun lowers itself, unhurried, behind the dark line of the Santa Cruz Mountains. The water in the slough turns the color of old pewter, and then of lavender, and then of a deep and quiet blue. One by one, in the long, low buildings of the Googleplex, the lights come on, first in a single window, then in another, then in a soft, scattered constellation across the campus, like the lamps of a village settling in for the night. Somewhere, a server fan whirs gently in a cool, dark room. Somewhere a query is typed, and an answer is offered, and a person on the other side of the world finds the small thing they were looking for. It happens now, billions of times a day, as ordinary as breathing, as quiet as a page being turned. And it all began with a campus tour in the spring of 1995, and two students who could not stop arguing, and a misspelled word on a whiteboard, and a check for $100,000 sitting in a drawer, and a wood-floored garage on Santa Margarita Avenue, where a young woman named Susan once rented out the space beneath her house to a pair of friends with a strange and beautiful idea. The eucalyptus trees go on shedding their bark. The marsh fades, gently, into evening. And the long, quiet rise of Googol drifts, at last, softly into rest.